Okay, so that it will be easier for you to identify today. But let me give you a brief outline of the anatomy so that you know what are the things that you should be looking at in the spinal cord. Okay. And then, of course, if you want to take a look at the brain again, you can do that today, and the spinal cord as well. Okay. So, before we go to the spinal cord, can you open up to page 266? Page 266, which tells you the coverings of the nerve, okay, coverings of a peripheral nerve, anatomy of a peripheral nerve. So we have a model, we just have one model over there on the side table, which you can look at later. But just like a muscle, a nerve is also made up of bundles of axons, okay. So each nerve that you see outside the brain or the spinal cord is a bundle of axons, lots of bundles of axons together form a nerve. So the outermost connective tissue covering of the nerve is called the epineurium, okay, which is shown in yellow on that model, and it's shown in yellow on your picture as well. Epineurium is the outermost connective tissue covering of a peripheral nerve. Inside the epineurium, you will find bundles of axons. Each bundle is called a fascicle, just like the muscle. Each bundle is called a fascicle, and the bundle is surrounded by another layer of connective tissue, which is called the perineurium. Epineurium, perineurium. And then within a fascicle, there are multiple axons, individual axons of neurons. Each individual axon is surrounded by the connective tissue called the endoneurium. Okay, so epineurium, perineurium, endoneurium, all of that is very nicely denoted in that model. Okay, so take a look at that once you have so use the picture, and it's exactly that. Now let's look at the spinal cord, okay, spinal cord anatomy. So the pictures are there on page 267 and 268, okay, and 269, you have the pictures there. So I'll just give you and also page 270, okay, you have the pictures. So let me give you a brief introduction to spinal cord anatomy, and then you can look at the models. Okay, so the spinal cord is like a connection between the peripheral parts of your body and the brain. Okay, it's like a relay station. So any information that needs to go up to the brain has to go through the spinal cord. Any information coming down from the brain to your body parts has to come down through the spinal cord. So the spinal cord is part of your central nervous system. Now, although we say that the spinal cord connects your body parts to the brain, the spinal cord itself can also perform certain functions. There are certain reflexes which can be performed at the spinal cord level itself. It doesn't even have to reach the brain. The brain doesn't need to know about it. It can happen, so the spinal cord can function as a boss. It can control certain functions. Okay, so although brain is the highest level of control, the spinal cord also on its own can process some information and perform the function. So these are called spinal reflexes. Now the spinal cord is protected just like the brain. It is protected by all the layers. So you have the vertebral bone, which is the outermost. Then you have the three meningeal layers, the dura mater, the arachnoid mater, and the pia mater, which is stuck to the outside of the spinal cord. So the spinal cord is a very slender structure, very slender. It's not very big. So the spinal cord sort of is inside, protected by these layers, and cerebrospinal fluid circulates in the subarachnoid space, just like the brain. Okay. Now, the only thing here is, in the brain, the dura mater is stuck to the underside of your skull bone. Okay, so there is no space between the skull bone and the dura mater. It's kind of stuck. But here in the vertebral column, the spinal cord, you see that there is a space between the dura mater and the bone. And that region is filled with fat. So that's why you see this yellow color. This is called epidural space. Epidural space. So this is where epidural anesthesia is given. So the injection is given into the epidural space. And of course, if you need cerebrospinal fluid, then you have to pierce the dura mater and get into the arachnoid to get the CSF. Okay? So epidural space. All the 3 layers. So you will be able to visualize this in the model that we have over there, you know, the one in blue. The one in blue and also the one next to it. Now, these 2 models that are here, the exact picture is on page 267. Page 267B and page 267 the C. Okay, make sure that you highlight that. You should know that well. We only have one model of each of those. The picture is taken and put up there. So you can take a look at this. Okay, with the help of the picture, take a look at it. Since we only have one, I'm not putting it on any table. It's here. So if you want, you can take it to your table, look at it, and then bring it back, put it here so that the other groups can look at it. Okay. Before we go on to look at what the spinal cord looks like, another thing, the spinal cord is sort of floating in the CSF here. So in order for the spinal cord to remain in position, you need to anchor it to the bone. You need to attach it to the bone so that it doesn't move within the vertebral space. Okay? So there are ligaments that attach the sides of the spinal cord to the bone. These are called denticulate ligaments. Denticulate ligaments. So in this model, you should be able to identify epidural space, dura mater, arachnoid mater, subarachnoid space where the CSF is found, okay, pia mater, which is the outermost layer here, denticulate ligament. Okay, you should be able to identify denticulate ligament. Now, okay, it is about 17 to 18 inches long. Okay, it starts at the foramen magnum, which is the end of in the occipital bone. It continues from the medulla oblongata and it goes all the way down to L1, L2. This is where the end of the spinal cord. And if you look at the end of the spinal cord, it is like a conical shape, like a triangle. You call this the conus medullaris. Now, this one you can look at the page 267. Look at figure A. Okay, conus medullaris. So these are the parts that you have to identify when you get the model. Okay, so conus medullaris is the tip of the spinal cord. Where does it end? L1, L2 vertebra. Okay, L1, L2. So if you look at the skeleton, so it's going to start from, this one is twisted. Okay, here you go. So it's going to start from the foramen magnum here and it's going to go, this is cervical, this is thoracic, and then now you come to the lumbar vertebra right here. This is the first lumbar vertebra, this is the second one. So L1, L2, this is where the spinal cord will end. Okay, it will end in a conical shape. We call that end conus medullaris. From there is a long ligament. Okay, it's not a ligament, it is the pia mater. the pia mater sort of extends all the way to the tailbone, because you don't want this end of the spinal cord to be shaking around. You want to hold it in position. So the pia mater, which is the outermost covering of the spinal cord, that meninx is going to, only the pia mater will extend all the way down to the tailbone, keeping the spinal cord in place. This long, in the middle, it is in the middle, okay. This one that extends all the way to the tailbone, this is called filum terminale. Filum terminale. If you want, write down next to that in your notebook, in your manual, it is an extension of the pia mater. Okay, write that down. It's an extension of the pia mater. It's not a separate ligament or anything. It's just an extension of the pia mater. So filum terminale. And then you see a bunch of nerves below the level where the spinal cord ends. After that, you're going to see a bunch of nerves, which looks like a horse's tail, the tail of a horse. This bunch of nerves that you see is called the cauda equina. Cauda is the tail, equine is a horse, horse's tail. Okay, cauda equina. Now, why do you see this bunch of nerves here? Because remember, from the spinal cord, from every segment of the spinal cord, a pair of nerves comes out. So you can see this. See this? From every segment, a pair of nerves is coming out. Okay? So this yellow thing that you see is coming out from every segment of the spinal cord. And this I have already mentioned to you before. There are 8 pairs of cervical nerves. So cervical nerves, you have 8 pairs. Okay, and this you must know. 8 pairs. Thoracic, you have 12 pairs. Let me write it on this side. So I'm repeating this, I know, but you should know this. Cervical nerves, 8 pairs of cervical nerves. C1 to C8, that's how we write. C1 to C8. Thoracic nerves. There are 12 thoracic vertebrae, so there are 12 thoracic nerves, 12 pairs. T1 to T12. Lumbar, we have 5 nerves. So lumbar, we have 5 vertebrae. We have 5 pairs of lumbar nerves. L1 to L5. Then sacral nerves. Again, sacrum is a combination of 5 vertebrae. So we have 5 pairs of nerves, sacral nerves, S1 to S5. S1 to S5. And then the coccygeal bone, the tailbone, we only, although it is a fusion of 4 tiny vertebrae, we only have 1 nerve, coccygeal nerve, 1 pair, CO1, 1 pair. Okay, so cervical nerves, they come out between each of the cervical vertebrae. Okay, thoracic nerves, T1 will come out between T1 and T2, T2 will come out between T2 and T3. So every nerve pair is going to come out between the cervical vertebrae. Okay, but once the spinal cord ends at L1, okay, it ends here. So all those nerves, L2, L3, L4, L5, which have to come out, they have to travel down and then come out from the respective intervertebral foramen. They have to come out. Okay, the sacral nerves have to go down and then come out like this. See? So that's why at the bottom, at below the end of the spinal cord, it sort of makes a bunch, because these nerves have to travel down before they can come out from the intervertebral space. Okay? So that is what forms the chorda equina. Now, another thing that you can notice by just looking at the spinal cord, the spinal cord is slightly bulged out in two places. It's slightly expanded. One in the neck region, cervical region. That is called the cervical enlargement. And there is another small enlargement in the lumbar region. Just before the spinal cord ends, it is slightly expanded. This is called the lumbar enlargement. Cervical enlargement and lumbar enlargement. So just by looking at the spinal cord model, you should be able to identify cervical enlargement, lumbar enlargement, conus medullaris, filum terminale, chorda equina, and these are the spinal nerves. These are the spinal nerves. This is what you should be able to identify on a model of the spinal cord. Now comes what is there in the spinal cord, microscopic. When you section the spinal cord, when you make a cut, what is it that you see? Okay? And this is your picture that is there on page 268. Okay? Now this is again very important. This one is important. Okay? And try to understand this. We have a model for the section of the spinal cord. How do you recognize which is anterior, which is posterior? That's the first thing. Okay? Now, the spinal cord is roughly sort of divided, just like your cerebral hemisphere is right and left. The same way, the spinal cord is also roughly separated into right and left side. How? By means of grooves. It doesn't cut the spinal cord into two, it's just a slit. On the anterior side, the groove is deep. On the posterior side, the groove is like a slit, it's a line. Okay, that's how you recognize which is the front of the spinal cord, anterior portion, which is the back. Okay, very important, this one. This is called the anterior median fissure. It's called the anterior median fissure. So throughout the front of the spinal cord, you will see this deep groove running all the way from the top of the spinal cord to the bottom of the spinal cord. There will be a deep groove. This is called anterior median fissure. Median because it's in the middle. This is called posterior median sulcus because it is not deep, it's just a line. Okay? So, anterior median fissure and posterior median sulcus. Okay? Now, you can follow the picture that is there. Let me draw this, so that way it is a little bit more clearer rather than just looking at the picture. Let me get rid of center project. This is called anterior median fissure. And I'm going to take a little time with this so that, because this is the most important part of it. This is called, this line is called the posterior median sulcus. And you can follow the picture, or if you want to draw, you can draw as well. Okay? Now, in the spinal cord, white matter is outside, gray matter is inside. Okay? It is opposite to what we saw in the cerebrum, where the gray matter is outside, white matter is inside. So here, in the spinal cord, the gray matter looks like a butterfly, the wings of a butterfly. So it's going to be narrow at the back like this, and it's going to be broad in front like that. Okay? So this is, so the same thing on this side. Okay, narrow here, narrow part of the wing, and then a broad part of the wing. Okay, and the gray matter of the two sides is connected by a bridge. It's connected by a bridge. They are not separated out. They are connected by a bridge, and right in the middle of this bridge is a tiny space. Okay, so this part is the gray matter. Now this larger wing, so if you see the broader wing, you know that that's the anterior part. Okay, the thinner portion is the posterior. That's another way of figuring it out, which is the front, which is the back. Now these broader wings, okay, this gray matter, this is called the anterior horn. Anterior horn, these two. The narrow ones, because these are at the back, these are called posterior horn. Posterior horn. And this bridge that you see in the middle, connecting the two gray matters, that is called the gray commissure. Okay, this is called the gray, this region, this bridge is called the gray commissure. And this hole that you see here, the space, this is the central canal of the spinal cord. Central canal, which is filled with CSF. So CSF flows through this central canal. Okay, and what's outside is the white matter. So now let's look at the gray matter. It's important to understand what is anterior horn, what is posterior horn. So you know that a pair of spinal nerves emerges from the spinal cord. I'm just going to draw one side of it. The same thing will be on the other side as well. Okay? This is not going to work. So the same picture on the other side as well. I'm just drawing one. Now this is the spinal nerve. This is the spinal nerve which is going to go to the body part. Okay. Now remember that spinal nerves are mixed nerves. Mixed nerves. What does a mixed nerve mean? That means it has both sensory and motor nerve fibers. A mixed nerve has both sensory and motor nerve fibers. You already know what sensory and motor means. Sensory means going towards the CNS, carrying information to the CNS, to the spinal cord and the brain. Motor means bringing information from the CNS to the body part. So it has both. A spinal nerve will have axons which are going to be sensory. It will have axons which are going to be motor. Okay, both. So this is called a mixed nerve. So when you come closer to the spinal cord, okay, once it goes into the vertebral canal, okay, what comes out of the vertebral canal is this single nerve, okay. But when you go closer to the spinal cord, you will see that it splits, okay. The one that is going on the back, this is called, this one, the one at the back, is called the posterior nerve root. Posterior nerve root. The one that is in the front of the spinal cord here, this is called the anterior nerve root. Anterior nerve root. Okay. Now the rule is, in the spinal cord, posterior nerve root is always sensory. This is sensory. Anterior nerve root is always motor. In other words, when a sensation is entering your spinal cord, so if my finger touches something that is hot, the sensation is going to enter my spinal cord through the back. Okay, the nerve is going to carry it like that and go here. And when I touch something hot, I need to withdraw my finger, I need to pull my finger back, my muscle has to contract. That information comes from the front of the spinal cord. So the posterior part is always sensory, anterior nerve root is always motor. It doesn't change, okay? It doesn't change. And this is an important thing to remember. And in the posterior nerve root, you are going to, it's posterior or dorsal. Okay, remember you can use, these are interchangeable. Anterior is called ventral. Ventral. So posterior nerve root or dorsal nerve root, anterior nerve root or ventral nerve root. Okay, ventral nerve root is always motor. That is sensory. Now, if you remember the lecture from the previous classes when we talked about the type of neurons, unipolar neuron, multipolar neuron, bipolar neuron. Sensory neurons are always unipolar. Okay, sensory neurons which form the sensory nerves, they are always like this. One branch and then one will go to the periphery and one branch will go towards the CNS. Okay, this is a pseudo unipolar neuron. So here also the posterior nerve root is a sensory nerve root. So the cell body of the neuron is here. Lots of cell bodies of the neurons in this place. From here, one fiber will go towards the spinal cord, another will go towards the peripheral body part. So the same thing with all of them. So this is a collection of the cell bodies of the neurons. So in the posterior nerve root, you are going to see a bulge. This bulge that you see is called, I'm going to just put the symbols DRG. That bulge, DRG, stands for dorsal root ganglion. Dorsal root ganglion. Or you can also say posterior root ganglion. The same thing. So this will be clearly visible. What does this dorsal root ganglion contain? It contains the cell bodies of pseudo unipolar sensory neurons. It controls the cell body, it contains the cell bodies of pseudo unipolar sensory neurons. Okay? And then within the gray matter of the spinal cord, you will have a lot of multipolar neurons which are going to connect. Okay? So there will be lots of multipolar neurons, and this is the motor nerve root which is going to supply the skeletal muscle or the gland or the organ. So here you will see the cell body of the neurons here, multipolar neurons. Okay? So the anterior horn contains cell bodies of multipolar motor neurons. Multipolar motor neurons. Okay? Because this is always motor. It's always going to come out like that. That is in the thoracic and the lumbar. Not in the cervical and sacral. In the thoracic and the lumbar, sometimes you will find another extension on the side like this. The gray matter will have a small extension. Okay? Only in the thoracic and the lumbar region. This is called the lateral horn. This is called lateral horn. So you have posterior horn, anterior horn. Lateral horn is only found in thoracic and lumbar regions of the spinal cord. Okay? So take a moment to get this, and this is important. I know it's a lot of information, but this is an important piece of information that you have to know. What is it?
Question.
Yes. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about the white matter, and then I will let you look at the models. So you are going to be identifying all of these parts that we talked about. Anterior median fissure, posterior median sulcus, posterior horn of the gray matter, anterior horn of the gray matter, gray commissure, central canal. In some of the models you may see a small extension on the side, that is the lateral horn. And then you're going to identify the spinal nerve. You're going to identify the posterior nerve root, the dorsal root ganglion, anterior nerve root. That's the gray matter. Okay? Now comes the white matter. So you see how the gray matter has separated the white matter into the white matter at the back. This is the white matter at the back. This is the white matter on the sides. And this is the white matter in front. Okay? Now the white matter basically is bundles of myelinated axons, the tracks, which are going up to the brain or coming down from the brain. Okay? Now there are a lot of complexities in this white matter. I'm going to simplify it to the bare minimum that you need to know. So let's start with the white matter that is at the back. Okay? So the white matter that is here. These are called posterior columns. Okay? You call them posterior columns. And whatever I am telling you now is important for lecture and lab. Okay? Don't think this is just lab. Also for lecture. Okay? Because they go hand in hand. The posterior column. What is this posterior column? You can also call it dorsal columns. Dorsal columns. Okay? What is this? This is the white matter at the back of the spinal cord. Now the posterior columns, and this is all that I want you to know, there are specific names for these columns. If you look at the lecture PowerPoints, the names are there, and in my audio lecture I tell you, do not worry about the names. There are specific Latin names for all these columns. But all you need to know is the posterior column. This is the name you want to know, or dorsal column. Where is it? It is at the back. Okay? One on either side of this posterior median sulcus. What kind of a column is this? What kind of a tract is it? What are these myelinated axons? Posterior columns are ascending tracts. When you say ascending, that means they are going up. So they are going up towards the brain. They are going up towards the brain. So that means when they're going up towards the brain, that means they are carrying information to the brain. So these are sensory tracts. These are sensory tracts. Okay? What kind of sensations are they carrying? Okay? These sensory tracts carry sensation of touch, pressure, vibration, proprioception. Okay? Very specific. Touch, pressure, vibration, proprioception. They are not carrying the sensation of pain and temperature. Okay? So they are very specific. So any sensation of pressure on your legs or pressure on your joints, vibration, if you're standing on a vibrating platform, remember the information is traveling through the back, to the brain. Okay? So these are the columns, the posterior columns are going to carry it up. Okay? Now, let's look at the lateral column. So the lateral column is going to be something like this. It is going to be on the sides, okay? The white matter on the sides and a little bit here in front as well, okay? A little bit here in front, not in the extreme front, but on the sides, So this second column that we are going to talk about, which is on the sides, this is called the anterolateral tract. So this is called the posterior column or the posterior tract or dorsal tract. Anything is the same. Now the ones on the sides, anterolateral. Antero means a little bit in front and on the side. So anterolateral, okay, because it goes from the spinal cord up to the brain, it's called anterolateral spinothalamic tract. Anterolateral spinothalamic tracts. Okay, so on both sides. So they are on the lateral side and a little in the front. So this white matter that is here, okay, anterolateral spinothalamic tracts. Now these are also ascending tracts. That is, they are going up to the brain. These are ascending tracts. These are sensory tracts. Ascending tracts are always sensory because they are going to carry information to the brain. Now, what kind of sensation does this carry? It carries the sensation of pain and temperature. So, dorsal column carries these. Anterolateral column carries these. Why should you know this? Because if damage occurs on the sides of the spinal cord, the person will lose the sensation of pain and temperature. They will not be able to detect pain and temperature. If the damage occurs at the back of the spinal cord, they will not be able to sense touch, pressure, vibration, proprioception. So you can see how compartmentalized it is. Everything is so nicely set up. It's not haphazard arrangement. So the white matter at the back carries the sensation of touch, pressure, vibration, and joint position to the brain. The tracks which are on the sides, they carry pain and temperature. So these two, dorsal column and anterolateral spinothalamic tract, these are both ascending tracks. Okay, they are both ascending tracks. They are going up. Now there are a lot of tracks that are coming from the brain, because the brain has to send information to your body parts. Okay, there are those are called descending tracks. Descending. Okay, so let me get rid of, I don't even know what to get rid of here. Let me get rid of this one. Then, okay, but I want you to know one tract. That's it. In the lecture audio also, the slide shows you all the different tracks, and I make it very clear. I want you to know one of them, okay? The most important. Now, descending tracks, that is, they are coming down from the brain, okay? They are bringing information from the brain. Descending tracks are always motor. These are motor tracks. These are motor tracks. Okay? And the most important of them is found here in the front. It's found in the white matter in the front. Anterior white matter. Anterior part of white matter, which is where you will see this, okay, the front. So what's in front of the spinal cord? The white matter in the front. The most important of this is the corticospinal tract. That is, it is coming from the cerebral cortex, the primary motor cortex. I told you upper motor neurons. It's coming from there all the way to the spinal cord. The corticospinal tract controls all the skeletal muscles. So your skeletal muscles will contract when information comes through the corticospinal tract to the neurons that are here. Okay? So these are the descending tracks. Okay? The descending tracks. So it controls all this. So I only want you to know the corticospinal tract. So in front, you have the descending tract, motor tract, which is the corticospinal tract. At the back, posterior column or dorsal column, which is ascending and sensory. And you should know what sensations it carries. On the sides, so these are the three that I want you to know when it comes to white matter. Okay? 1, this one, 2, and 3.